Notice that the toolbar in its given state is currently collapsed. When I click on the first button, which is Equation Editor, it expands. And I also would like to share with you that there are three dots in the middle of your toolbar that when I drag up and down, I can give myself more space inside of Equatio. I'd also like to take a look at the different buttons inside the Equation Editor before we start making our math. You will notice that we have this green emoji, which allows us to see whether our math is recognizable by our system. It is in a traffic light pattern, and if we see green, that's good. Yellow, of course, is caution, and red is we don't recognize the math at all. So you might have to go into the Equation Editor and make some adjustments, but the emoji will tell you whether the math is recognizable by our system. Also over here, we have some different functions, symbols, math operations, and whatnot, so you're free to use any of these buttons that are over to the right side of our toolbar. Greek letters and other different items are certainly allowed to be used, but we would prefer you to kind of stay within Equation Editor and use our vast prediction library here. I'd also like you to recognize these four buttons at the very top. The first one, which looks like a college graduation hat, is what we call our Equatio Academy. Clicking on the Academy button will open up a wealth of resources that are available to you, the product user, for learning different tricks, shortcuts, and hints to maximize the use of our program. I'd also like you to recognize the Insert Text button. This is great. When I click here, it allows me to enter maybe directions for students, and I can easily type in words into my math equation editor. This right here allows me to use the color palette. We encourage students to use the color palette to show different steps in solving equations. So, for example, if I was to type in 2x squared, I could easily click and drag to highlight my math. You might have noticed the text color button was grayed out and now it's accessible. I can click here and choose from the different color options. I'm going to choose red. You will notice the font changes to red, and then when I insert that math, it'll go right into my Google Doc as red. So there wouldn't be a need to go up here and change your text color. The last and final button is your clear button, or as some might call it, the trash can. This allows me to clear all items in my equation editor and start with a fresh blank slate. Let's now try and put our prediction engine to the test. Click in the box, and I'd like you to type in something very basic and simple in terms of expressing math. Let's try something like 5 squared. Now, one thing I recall from being a math teacher is I found myself teaching students how to make some of those structures that are often complex and complicated to do on a keyboard. What we've done with our equation editor is provided this prediction bank where when students say something like 5 squared, you can say 5 SQ and begin to spell out the word squared. Once I see my prediction engine pop up, it is predicting that I want to express 5 squared, and that's one of the great things about our product is we don't have to know and be familiar with those structures. I'm going to now insert that math, and notice that 5 squared is here. So in other words, there's no teaching of superscripts and subscripts and whatnot. Other structures that are commonly used for math, what about teaching something like long division? So if I begin to type in long, you'll notice that our prediction engine decides it thinks that we want to type in some division. So I'm going to click here and notice that Equatio provides that structure for us to input numbers as our quotient, our dividend, and our divisor. So providing this structure for students is extremely powerful. I can go and insert that math when I'm ready, but I think it would be best if you take a second, pause the video, and try and type in your own special structure system that you would like. Maybe you want to try something like 6 squared or 14 cubed. Go ahead and pause the video and give it a try. Hopefully you were successful with trying your structure. I'd like to show you a couple keyboard shortcuts. Let's try something like square root. If I type in SQ, I can see square root here, and notice that I can simply type in a number under the square root symbol. If I would like to, let's say, make the square root of 16 as my numerator, there are a couple different ways to do this. You can tap the right arrow key and notice that it'll take you outside of the square root symbol. I'm going to tap back the left arrow key and go back under the structure, and then I'm going to try the tab key. Notice the tab key also takes you outside of the structure. What if I type in something like square root of 16 over, and notice when I start to type OV and I tap here, this is how I can make the square root of 16 my numerator. So maybe I want to put 5 here. And then I can insert that math, and I want to show you what that looks like as I insert that into my Google Doc. Notice that the square root of 16 over 5, when I click here, this is an image, and notice that I can take my cursor and drag my cursor to make that slightly bigger. I also would like to point out, because I indicated that this is an image, you will lose some resolution in pixelation. We encourage you to keep the setting at its default. Now remember, you can always go back into your Equatio options and change the output for your numbers by clicking Math Options and going here and changing the font size if you need to. One of our most commonly asked questions is about fractions, so I wanted to show a couple more ways to make fractions. I'm going to type back in the square root of 4 and hit the right arrow key and type in the words out of. And all I really have to do is type in out. I'll see my prediction come into play, and square root of 4 has now moved into my numerator. Also, and one final way to do this is I can highlight and hit delete, or just clear my math editor. I can type in square root again of 4, and then simply push the front slash key. Now the front slash key, because I didn't arrow out of my structure, is putting everything under the square root. If I didn't want that, I could of course go back, then hit the right arrow key, and then try the front slash key, and notice that it made the structure that I was trying. So these are just a couple of the ways that your students and you can make numerators and denominators using our product. Before moving on and showcasing another input method, I'd like to help out our chemistry friends by showing, and remember, I toggled on the chemistry prediction. You must have this turned on in order for this to show and work. I'm going to show my chemistry friends how to access some of the many hundreds of chemical compounds that we have built into our product. So I'm going to start by typing in something like Al. And the reason why I typed in Al is I'm trying to access all of our aluminum compounds. Notice that as I scroll down, there are several to choose from. And let's say that I want to pick something like aluminum hydroxide. I can simply click on it, and it's going to put the chemical compound in the math editor. Obviously, the best way to get this into my Google Doc is to go ahead and hit the insert button. And notice the chemical compounds are here. Or maybe I want to show chloride or chlorine. So I can type in CHLO, and I can access many of the chemical compounds within our prediction tools. So chlorine dioxide, and it's going to make the chemical compound here, in which I can then insert into my Google Doc. So I'd like to take a second, if you could, pause the video, and for anyone that would like to try out the chemistry prediction features, I'd like you to do that at this time. Another great feature of our product is the ability for us to produce arrows for students to use. I'm going to access this chemical compound, aluminum arsenate, and when I click on it, I might need to show that there is an arrow that I need to put in my chemical compound. So for example, arrow right and notice that the arrow goes right after the structure. So this would be very, very difficult for students to potentially put and use in a digital environment. So the ability to use our prediction features can come in really, really handy. The last thing here, real quick, that I want to show is some of our formulas, and I always love to show the quadratic formula. Now, the reason I like to show this one in particular is pretty obvious when you look at it, because this would be awful difficult also for students to reproduce in a digital environment. So I have negatives, I have the plus and minus, I have square roots, superscripts, and then all of it in fraction form. So the ability, and again, if I just simply go here and start to type in QUA, I can access the quadratic formula and pop that right into my Google Doc. Really awesome and super easy to produce using our product. I'd also like you to imagine not only producing this with paper and pencil, but in a digital environment. For statistics, I like to show the correlation coefficient of sample, and notice that this is a very, very cumbersome formula to reproduce. But I can simply type in CORR and pop that also right into my Google Doc. Other formulas to take a look at are Simpson's rule of integration. Imagine showing this in a paper pencil environment, let alone a digital environment. I can simply type in, again, something simple like Simpsons, and SIMP will predict that I want that particular formula, and I'm going to move my cursor here and insert that math into my document. So really, really great examples to show for some of these really lengthy formulas a way to produce these items in a digital one-to-one environment. If you need more time to practice in our equation editor using these prediction items, now would be a good time to pause the video and do some more practice on your own before we move on to LaTeX.